The following episode may contain spoilers for the game Frosthaven. Welcome to episode 11 of our board game podcast, A Master's Degree in Rolling Terribly. I'm still your host, Deddy, and joining me as always, a man who is a man of something. I'm having a mental blank this week, so hopefully he can pull me through this episode. Gaz! Say hi, Gaz.
Wow, way to lean on me and make me do all the hard work.
Well, sometimes being sassy and what's the other word? No, my brain's not working right now.
Well, I guess I'll have to bring the sass and wit to this podcast today.
No, thank you. This week we actually had episode 10. It was a milestone one which we are launching. It should be up now actually, where we actually had a little interview with Gaz about his Geminate and about his gaming with Gaz. But this week also, we actually head over to a random scenario that we got as a treasure from one of the previous scenarios that we did. We unlocked 2 side random scenarios, and this is one of the ones that we're doing. It is scenario 112, and it's called Raised by Wolves. And in the section part of the book, when we did discover this random scenario, we found a little doggo, and it was really cute, and it was kind of like leading us to its home.
Well, it ran off. It was hanging out with us, and it ran off, and we chased it, and then
so we decided to actually chase it.
Yeah, we followed
it after a couple of weeks.
Yeah, we were hanging out in Frosthaven with it, and then suddenly it decided that it was going to run off, and we're like, oh, okay, sure, we'll follow you, I guess.
We'll go to we'll deal with the Birdman and all that kind of stuff, and now we're thinking of going to find this dog.
Yep, definitely. So
we head over to 112, and then we come back and have our outpost event, and then we'll just have a little chat about the actual session that we just completed.
Before we get into it, though, we got an email or contact. Someone contacted us, I believe.
Did we?
Yeah, I think we did. We got one, and the instant thought we had was like, oh no, more things that we've done wrong.
Yeah. No, I know what you mean now. Sorry, I totally forgot about that.
I feel like it was giving us their thoughts on how some things worked. So it wasn't. I'm pretty sure the comment started with something like no rules clarifications this time.
Oh, yeah. So Iron Wine contacted us again and just said there were no corrections this week. And then talked about, because we were discussing scenario 114, which was the bomb one that we kind of delved into last time, and just explained that his group also did something similar with the taking advantage of the damage from the bombs and mitigating that.
Yeah.
And just waiting for everything to swarm up, discarding cards to avoid the actual damage before deciding when they wanted to sort of unleash it and take out a bunch of pillars and monsters in the one go. And they actually use little like Lego pieces as well, which is actually pretty cool.
Yeah, that's a cool idea of just having other little bits and pieces in there to symbolize some of those. So I just it's really cool, but I have this now paralyzing fear every time we get a comment that I'm like, oh no. And it's like, so far it's been I'll say pretty major stuff, but things that were very easy to reverse and or get past. Like the whole Frosthaven thing wasn't as much, going back to Frosthaven wasn't much of an issue because we weren't that far in. So I really appreciate people coming up and saying, hey, this is how we did this, and I love it. And so please keep contacting us. But every time Diddy goes, and so we got another message, and I'm like, oh no, I'm just thinking all the things that I maybe did wrong.
That is literally the reason why I was saying to you when you arrived and you sat down, I was like, so we got another email, and just look on your face was just so funny. I was like, nah, it's fine, it's all good.
Yep. So but yes, appreciate that, and again, as we go through more, let us know what you're thinking.
Mm.
Because it's really cool as well to hear back, I guess, how other people are playing some of these scenarios, how other people are playing some of the classes, and just how you are enjoying the game and also the cast, because it kind of helps us keep our direction of what we're going to go through and talk about.
Yeah, definitely. So we had a road event.
Yeah, what was
Yeah.
the road event?
So we heard voices, and we tried to work out what it was, and it's interesting when a road event comes up because it's kind of like how specific do we get when we talk about it? But it was a little voice, and it was kind of like, what do we do with it? And
Oh,
then we
yeah, that's
either
right. Yes, yes, yes. I
what
remember
do we
now.
do?
Because it's funny because I actually genuinely didn't remember, and you're deliberately being vague so that we
Yeah,
don't spoil it. And so I'm trying to put together your clues into figuring out what it is, and yeah, but it just clicked again. And I'm really excited about this one. So again, keeping the vagueness going, we made a decision that has done a thing that we have no idea about what it'll pan out to be, but it will hopefully be really cool.
yeah, it will come back.
Yep.
Which
Yep.
is fantastic.
So I'm loving those little they're almost like appetizers towards a story arc or a bigger kind of payoff by saying like, because you made X decision, here, have this thing, right?
Yeah,
Like,
we're changing the future.
yeah, well, I think in this one, and again, we're not giving anything away, so it doesn't matter. But we put a little sticker on our little kind of what's it called? The
Campaign sheet.
town, yeah, the campaign sheet, yeah,
Yeah,
which
yeah.
is kind of tells us that we've done that thing. So yeah, I'm looking forward to when it goes, hey, have you got that sticker? And we're like, yes, we did
Yeah,
that
we got the
thing.
sticker.
Yeah,
That's
so
right. Here's our
yeah,
sticker. What do we get?
yeah,
Punch in the
that's it.
face, and you start wounded.
Yeah, probably, and 10 gold. We're like, great, that was not worth the payoff.
So we got our sticker, and we put it on our piece of paper, and we're very happy, like a 7-year-old. And then we head towards 112, following our little dog friend. So we load up Fortella. I don't play it yet. I'm setting it up. And the one thing I did notice was while we were setting it up, there were creatures in the room, some that we've never seen before, and we had hounds in the room, and we had what looked like weird millipede bug standing men things. That's a terrible description, but I know what I'm talking about. They turned out to be called burrowing blades. And we also had earth demons. But the part that kind of confused me and made me a little bit worried is we hadn't heard the actual scenario yet, but where we spawn, there are 2 hounds. And when we loaded it up in the Frosthaven Secretariat on the computer, these hounds had a lot more health than normal hounds. And immediately I was like, oh, we are starting right next to these creatures. And then we let Fortella explain what was happening. And these are the little pupper's parents. And they're our allies, which was pretty cool. So we actually had dog pets.
And just as a side note, because I'm probably going to keep getting this wrong, so as a disclaimer, these were hounds, correct?
Yeah.
Even though we have a wolf pup.
Look,
And
I don't
we're
want to
in a wolf den.
No, we're not going down this path again. Like, leave this alone. Okay, they're hounds, but they're dogs, canines, whatever you want to go. They're our allies this time. We're friends with them. Let it go, guys.
And the scenario is called Raised by Wolves, right?
No, that
Not
was
Raised by Hounds?
no.
Okay.
It's
cool.
just a saying. It's an old saying that we say in Australia every day.
Didn't go ate my baby.
so now you've thrown me off with that.
That's all right. I'll continue from here. One of the things that to carry on what we were talking about was, yes, 100%. The spawn points were right in between these 2 beefed up looking wolfhounds. And we were like, oh, okay, this is going to be interesting, because it was another one of those scenarios we started in the opening one. We're like, wow, there's a lot on the board.
Yeah,
right?
no prep, right? You gotta hit this dog. Do I prep or do I hit this dog?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, and we know the hound wolves, they hit pretty hard and go pretty quick sometimes. So that was it before we listened to the intro.
Definitely. So we set it up, and the scenario goal was basically to kill everything. And if either of these dogs die, we lose the scenario. And as a special rule, we could choose to discard a card from our hand or 2 from our discard to mitigate damage that one of these dogs would take. which was really cool. Actually, I hadn't seen that with the priest that got booked in the beginning.
what, what's funny is that if we go back and read the scenario description
Yeah,
for that one, and it basically says the same thing,
yeah,
and then people will probably listening to that one going like, "The idiots! Let's just discard a card. Like, what are they doing?" So, but yes, what I find really interesting and was always going to happen is as soon as we found out that the loose condition was for either one of these wolves to die, what was the first thing that they did?
Oh, went super early and then ran into the packs.
Yes, we literally walked in going like, okay, wolf people, we're going to break up this bug earth demon jamboree and steal back your wolf den. Can you please stay? Oh, you've already run off.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks, guys. Like, I guess we try and keep up.
Yeah, essentially. So let me talk a little bit about what we're up against regarding these new creatures, because look, it's very exciting whenever we see a new standee because we're like, oh, wonder what these things do, right? What's their jam? How do they respond? The Burrowing Blades, and the word I was looking for, because I actually said to you across the table, these guys remind me of, and I couldn't get it. It's a toy or an anime or something, Beyblades. The little spinny dudes that they just spin and battle each other, because these guys basically have a thing where they target someone who's really far away, and then I'm picturing them spinning midair as they fly and just wound everything on the way to wherever they're targeting, wherever they're traveling. And that's something that these guys continued to do as they were plowing through everything. The very first thing they did, quickly, they have an innate shield. The elites have 3, and the normals have 2. So that's already like, oh, here we go. It's another shield one, right? Go Pierce. Not the most amount of health. They do that thing where they fly from one side to the other, damaging everything on the way, but they also have another card that muddles and curses everything along the way. And they also opened with probably the worst possible card for Calvin, because it was just a flat out move and do 2 damage to everything in range 2. And right from the very get-go, his creature got booked immediately.
That's right. Yeah.
Right from the start. And it gave him a pretty kind of rough start as to getting his preparation on board. So that was the Burrowing Blades, and we'll go a little bit about what they sort of dealing with them. The other thing we had was the Earth Demons, and to be honest, I personally didn't see anything special with them. They just big dudes that moved fairly slow. They actually had pretty low movement. They just hit fairly hard. And the only thing that surprised me was actually they had some pretty hard-hitting ranged attacks as well. And they seem to mess a lot with grass element, nature element.
I mean, they're from Gloomhaven, so they're just they're your big punching bag. 18 health. They will, if you leave them alone, as you said, they can hit pretty hard and move up, and they
have some of those little AOE ones as well that we love lining up for, and we actually did a few times as well.
Oh, we're so good at that. We're like stack. I mean, how good was that lining up for? We didn't know that these Beyblade things were going to jump across the map and like wound everything and spin. And we literally lined up as we read the card and we're like, oh, good. The furthest person away, we've basically made a Congo line so it can hit every single one of us along.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we did great.
Yeah. So, like you said, the very first thing that happened was before we could put our plan into place, the dogs ran off. And we're straight up to 2 of these, and they both went together, thankfully. And they went straight to this Earth Demon, and they started wailing into the Earth Demon, which all of a sudden is a bit awkward because it's really hard to peel aggro off them when they're both surrounding the Earth Demon, right? All of a sudden, it kind of puts a bit of a, because they're going to start taking some whacks, and our only option is to either burn down the things or to heal them. And then Beyblade dudes, Burrowing Blades, started doing their thing. There was a period of time where nearly all of us were wounded, and one of the dogs was pretty badly messed up and with a wound, and the other one we all had wounds, and we're all going to be ticking. I looked at my cards that I had brought, and I had brought 1 top heal and 1 bottom heal, and I can't remember, but I think the top heal might be associated with one of my persistent abilities, which may have been a movement. So I already did not have a lot of heals to pump out. We had someone though. Yep.
Our savior.
Yeah.
Yep.
So we were discussing how we're going to keep these dogs alive. Not to mention all of us have wounds on us just from a couple of turns from these guys that are spinning all around the place and knocking all of us around. And then a Bone Shaper says, I got this, and walks perfectly in the center of a 2 range AoE and pops the fattest of heals that I have ever seen in the game of Frosthaven, Gloomhaven, or anything. It was easily a 28 heal altogether.
Yeah.
Healing absolutely everything and removing all the wounds. And it was so good.
And to top it all off, he got 2 loot cards as well.
That's right.
There was 2 loots there because Phil was like, a Deathwalker was like, "Can I go there?" We're like,
Oh
he's like,
yeah,
"Oh well, if I go there, I can heal everybody for 4."
that's right.
Oh, can you go there after I go there? And we're like, this is seriously not a consideration. Okay, we're not weighing up the fact that you want to loot 2 things versus him basically saving the, because he did when he did that, and I think we mentioned it afterwards. He basically just reset the room.
Yeah,
Like everyone went back up to full. No one was wounded. I think I had a heal that I threw on him as well, so that pumped him up. So it kind of basically just set everything back to 0, and it was the perfect timing for it. So it kind of allowed us to really just mop up the room.
yeah. And then that was really good because I think one of the first skeletons he had insta-gibbed at the very beginning, and then he had to bring out his 6 health, I don't know, abomination, his fatter dude, and his wraith. And he was asking us, does any of these things have retaliation? Because obviously he was planning on whether or not he needed that card. But he made his army, and he was 100% MVP for that first room because he was doing so much. And we managed to clean that room quite nicely and start prepping towards the next room, the next door, and we were organizing that. So the first room, once Calvin popped, our Bone Shaper popped that heal, we got to basically clean up the rest of it, and it was actually pretty good. In fact, I didn't do much because I was out of position, and more on that later.
No,
More on that later. More on that
Okay.
later. So I popped
Other
a few
reasons
heals,
why you didn't do anything.
and I had to prop my top and my bottom, and then I had another round where I put another bottom. I was really, really ready to go. Once that door opened, and the corridor was revealed.
Yeah. Yeah, we were like, "Daddy, you ready to go?" And then, like 3 rounds later, he's like, "Almost."
Yes. So once we dispatched everything that we had there, we basically went into the second room, and the second room was a pretty narrow corridor with water tiles that served as difficult terrain, which basically Calvin's usefulness ended in this room because corridor is bad. He had 2 extra pets to deal with because of the dogs, and he was not, the Congo line wasn't happening.
It wasn't
which is very
moving.
unfortunate. No, not at all.
Yeah.
In this room, we had more Earth Demons, and then behind it, we had another new standee, and we had Chaos Demons. And the Chaos Demons...
Chaos Demon or Chaos Spawn?
Chaos something. Let me...
One of the things, just while you're looking that up, that was scary about these when they appeared, and I
Chaos
thought...
Demon.
Chaos Demon, okay, you are right, was the first thing that they had Bane on it.
Yeah.
And we haven't seen Bane yet.
It was the first chance of seeing Bane in the game. Funnily, you should mention Bane because Phil also, one of his new cards was a Bane card. So there was a whole new toy happening actually on both ends, which was kind of freaky, but it was interesting that it was happening from both sides as well.
Well, and I believe that where they were going to move, eat dark, and then Bane something. And I think with Phil's turn, he was, because he opened the door to go in, he used he's got to move and go invisible, but it creates dark. So when he did that, we were like, no, absolutely do not create dark, because no one's going to use it and they're going to eat it and bane us. But we worked out they were far enough away so they weren't going to hit it, so he did it anyway. So they did eat the dark and they did generate the bane, but it didn't go on anyone. So, but that was the first card. I was like, "Ooh, these things are going to be nasty." I just have a feeling they're going to have like those really kind of almost like the Harrowers. Like
I was getting that vibe.
Yeah, most of the Harrowers cards are just really nasty. They're not really big hits, but they just do things like they might AoE or they'll poison or they'll heal themselves and have retaliate or some weird stuff like that to make them annoying to kill, but also really kind of tricky to or dangerous to fight.
Yeah, the Chaos Demons also have innate muddle, which just added to the kind of awkwardness in that, we're starting to come across these enemies with innate brittle, innate wound, and now innate muddle, which is its own thing, because once they're starting to do a couple of AoEs and a couple of their abilities, it's starting to slow our damage down a little bit. But what I did notice is not only do they have innate muddle, but they actually were hitting anywhere between 4 and 6 damage per pop, which was actually really hard. It's just we managed to tank via dog for a little bit,
Yeah.
which was really handy. And one of their cards actually super surprised me and made me a bit worried was the one where they literally were like, cool, we make all the elements. We will make everything.
When that happened, my eyes lit up. So, if you have listened to the last episode we did, which we had a bit of a chat about the Geminate, one of the things I was still working out from a puzzle perspective is how do I get my elements? And I've got cards that can turn other elements into elements that I need, and blah blah blah. But there has seemed to be a whole bunch of it just never seems to be the right combination or time. And one of their cards, they made every single element. And I was just like looking at all of my cards going like, oh my God, I can do the extra ability on literally everything I have.
Well,
how do I do this?
Eat fire. You've never done that before. Do you want to eat that fire?
Yeah.
You've never tasted it.
Exactly. And we'll get to what I did with that in a sec as once we wrap up the things, but it was pretty cool.
So I, as a drifter, brought in a new card that I took. I don't know if this is general for other drifters, because a lot of the times our card choices when we level up are a little bit of range or a little bit of healing or a little bit more melee and a little bit more cleave or whatever. The level 4 card I collected was the Shield 2 card. So I was actually running around with that in the hopes that was going to be... It was actually really good. It was actually really handy because this was the room where I was pretty much out the front now that I had fully equipped everything. I had my whole setup going, and I ran in there with that. So we had the 2 Earth Demons in there, and then we had the Chaos Demons as well, wailing on me and the dogs. So the dogs came in to help out with some tanking, and because the dogs were moving in, and then Gaz and Phil were jumping in, the Congo line in the previous room was still there. Yeah,
and I'll call it out because we've given you heaps of crap about this over several episodes, but your tanking ability in that scenario was great. Like, you absolutely were getting wailed on for, I'd say, from once we got into that second room, that corridor room to the end, and you just kept moving that little thing along and tanking and say, yep, 3, no, that's 1. Yep, cool. 4, no, that's 2, right? And a couple of times having your shield that you kept forgetting to use, and other bits and pieces. Like I think, I can't remember the stats. I think we might have read them out at the end, but you did so much work with that tanking. So you did a really, really good job. You finally found your niche.
Yeah. No, it was... All it took was a card that had 2 shield on it.
All it took was you to actually put the tanking cards on, right? Thing we've been asking you for 9 scenarios.
I saw the hard hitting, I saw the beginning of this, and part of my prep was, no, let's go with the 2 shield. I'm sure this will come in handy. And sure enough, it did. Who knows? Blocking damage and causing other people to not get hit is actually good for the team. Go team. So this room tended to be a little bit trickier, especially with the water in between. The dogs did a surprisingly good job of doing a lot of damage, actually. They did a lot of damage, and they helped to mitigate some of that damage. And we slowly, ate our way through the Earth Demons, and then started to pick apart the Chaos Demons, and work our way towards the back of this corridor. Now, I don't know anyone else who saw this. I may be the only one, but the map was looking very phallic at this point. And I opened up the Frosthaven scenario viewer because we opened up the 3rd room, waiting to see almost like a dome, and it wasn't. Well, it kind of was, but it was on an angle, and Phil made a pretty funny comment about a curve happening. But sorry, immaturity aside, we set up the third and final room, and in this room we got more Beyblades, burrowing blades, and we had more Chaos Demons.
Yeah,
and Gaz took care of door duties this time.
And so, just in case anybody thought that our podcast was above dick jokes, it is not. So, and yeah, so this was the fire on all the other elements that got created were waning, so they were only half on now. They were half on now, and I looked at it and I went, all right. So I'm going to run as far as I can, which I think was a move 4 at the time. Maybe I used my boots to make it a 5. It got me to open the door, land on the doorway. No idea about the size of the room here. And I threw all my eggs into I want to do something cool bucket. And I used my new level 3 card, I think it is. Must be level 3. Which is basically like an attack 6, I believe. And if I eat fire, it gets advantage. It might get a +1, or maybe it's a 7. I can't really remember off the top of my head. So, but the problem is, like a lot of my ranged abilities, they're not just like, hey, just hit something at range up to range 4, right? They are really specific. It needs to be range 4 or 5.
It's like when I was setting up the room and I was placing the standees. You're like, oh,
Oh,
good. That one's good. They're
it was
good.
like
And
this
I'm
wave.
positioning them
It's like a
around.
roller coaster of emotion because every time you put the room, I'm like, okay, big room, and I'm counting how many squares are in there. I'm like, okay, I can reach basically the other side of the room. That's great. Okay, so if they're over there, I can hit them. And then I realized I'm like, oh wait, no, if they're in the middle of the room, I can't. Like, they have to be kind of far away. And you're
Yes.
putting them down. I'm like, too close, too close, too close. Four, yes, four. I can hit that guy. All right,
Yeah,
cool.
that
And
poor
by the time
guy.
everything came out, I think there was two that I could target, so I was trying to pick. So I did my thing. I played the card. I ate my fire. I got myself advantage, and this was the card that I played last week in our bomb scenario where I went, yeah, don't worry, I've got this pillar. Don't worry, I'll nail it because this is 6 damage on the pillar, and I pulled my miss. Right, so
Hmm.
this was a lost card that does a bunch of damage to one target, and it was a miss. And I was like, all right, cool, that sucks. All right, whatever. So set up this, jumped in, ate the fire, pulled the card, and it's a miss. And I'm like, you know what? I now realize that this ability has 100% chance to miss, regardless of the fact that it does 6, 7 damage. Luckily, because I ate the fire, and this is why I actually chose to go with that one, it gave it advantage. So I pulled the second card, and it was like a 0 or -1 because why would I get a positive? I think at that stage I had
No, you
three.
crit.
No, I didn't crit on that one.
Oh, really? Oh, okay.
No, I
Because
don't think so.
one of the normals you were hitting, you hit for like 10 or something, and they had 11 health. You put it on one with a wound. I
Yeah,
vaguely remember that in that last room.
yeah. Well, I think that was the one. I might have done a bit extra damage, but yeah. Anyway, whatever it was, I think I was because I was blessed. Plus, I have 2 crits in my deck, so I was like, oh, I'm totally gonna crit this, right? And I think as well at that stage, I was most of the way through my deck. Like I was like
Mm.
halfway through. So out of the remaining cards, I remember fanning out my cards that were in the discard of my modified deck, and they were all zeros and -1s, like all red or grey. I'm like, I've just got pure fire in this deck. I'm gonna pull something out here, and it's just gonna go off chops, right? And then it's the miss and like a 0 or -1. I was like, oh,
Mm.
okay, sure, why not? So
Consistent.
it was a bit lackluster, but it worked because I think I did wound him, and he took a damage, couldn't do anything, and then died next turn. So
Yeah.
in sense, it was killing one of the chaos demons, which
Hmm.
was kind of thinned it,
Yep.
and it felt good. And because they didn't move very far, I originally thought I was going to get absolutely booked, but I think I got hit once and then was able to pull back.
Yeah, well, generally, after you open the room, we kind of went old school WoW with this, and you opened the door, did your thing, and then we pulled back into the corridor and baited them towards us. And this is something we always want to do, but most times we have an objective that's like, no, you got to hit
Hmm.
that thing at the end, right? You got to hit this thing at the end. You can't do this. So it was really cool that we actually had a scenario where we could actually take advantage of this and try to bait them back into the room.
Hmm.
And this is when the Beyblades went, oh, by the way, we're going to pick, one of Calvin's pets on the other side of the corridor, and we're going to curse and muddle everything on the way. And look, Calvin has a lot of pets, and when this thing's hitting all of them, that's a lot of curses that go into his deck.
That's right.
And everything's muddled, and it's super sad.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
yeah, we managed to pull them back in. I managed to get off something that I was super excited to do, which is one of my level 2 cards. I think it's really boring from the looks of it. It just lets you hit attack 2 on 2 targets in melee range. But I've always wanted to combine that with Crushing Weight and Shockwave. And Crushing Weight is the +2 for each of the attacks, and Shockwave is when you target something, you can target something adjacent, and that can take 2 damage. And this was like my stars aligning, and I was demanding to be allowed to get this off. And I mean, it was okay. It was good damage, but it was just nice to be able to do it. And unfortunately, because of my bad timing, actually both my tokens slid off for the persistent abilities of both. And all of a sudden, I felt so gimped once it was
Well,
over.
leading up to Calvin actually he could give a strengthen to somebody,
Mm,
and we were kind of tossing it between because I was also going to hit 2 things, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to hit 2 things. I'm basically going to be able to hit for 6, I think, on each of them, and so having advantage would be really good because I was going to give myself muddle. So I was like, it'll be good to be able to do that. And
yeah.
you were like, no, me, I'm pulling rank, I'm doing it, and I was like, yeah, all right, let him do it, let him do it.
All right, never gets
And
to
it was
hit
good.
anything.
Yeah, it was. You did again. It was very effective. Like I think you cleaned up both of them. So
Yeah. Off the top of my head, Phil Bane something, and that was fun, especially when we watched it in the auto Gloomhaven Secretary when we get down to that particular character and it activated, and then once it finished, Bane ticked over and the thing just disappeared. It was really, really nice. So he got a Bane off. I can't remember too much of maybe things that he did in there. I'm sure they were cool, but he didn't have the standard, we need to kill this 40 hit point thing. Don't worry, I've got this. Because
because he used a couple of his other abilities early, so he's been trying a little bit of a different play in that in the past he's used
he
his
didn't mark
persistent.
anything.
Yeah, he hasn't been playing that card, the persistent one that allows him to every time he attacks something, it puts a mark on it, and then if they die, it turns into a shadow. He's trying the other method, and I think he's mentioned he doesn't enjoy it as much, so he's probably going to go back to it. But in that first room, he spewed up all his shadows. Normally he waits to the later room, so he did that, and I think there was a reason for it. But yeah, he kind of used some of those cards early. In saying that, he is the one who jumped basically from like the second room to the end of the third room to go pick up the chest.
That's right.
So he did he did teleport, and then he did some movement and stuff like that. So yeah, he did the Bane, did a bunch of damage, but yeah, it wasn't one of those, hold my beer, I'm gonna kill everything in the room type moments. But he was pretty consistent through the whole scenario.
Yes. And we basically finished the scenario. Like, there were a couple of moments where one of the dogs was taking an absolute dicking, and we had to discard a few cards. Thankfully, that was an option. There was one point where I was like, guys, if this is a crit, we lose. And then I was reminded, no, we just discard a card. Yeah. And it's like but it's kind of like working out who. This is why some of us have more cards than others at that particular point.
Ooh. No, because one of the things, it took like 6 damage. I'm like, I'm going to discard a card for that. You're like, no, don't discard a card. I'm like, well, I've got heaps of cards. Like, it's worthwhile discarding on a 6. And you're like, fine, I'll discard a card then. I'm like, wait, hang on. This wasn't a conversation of who's going to discard it. I volunteered to discard one. You're like, I've already discarded it. Don't worry about it. It's like, how did we go from no to you doing it? So, but yes. Anyway, it was, it was good to have that as a backup, and definitely made it feel a lot less lose-worthy.
Yes. So yeah, we ended up finishing that particular scenario. Our award, funnily enough, was 15 XP, which was lovely. Always welcoming that as a reward for the actual scenario. And this was actually one of the few scenarios where I kind of was a little bit more invested in what was happening, because it was really interesting that we went in there with the parents of this little dog that we found, and then went into a place where, it's surrounded by demons and all that kind of stuff. And then by the end of it, everything's all safe and happy in Disney. And then we walk away and the dog's looking at us leave and everyone's sad. And, the narration says, you walk away with a tear in your eye kind of thing. And I was like, oh, so nice.
Yeah.
It was so cool.
Like the first and only happy thing that'll ever happen in Frosthaven, right? Because we're going to return to Frosthaven. They're like, oh, it's burned down.
Well, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, well, I think that scenario was like, we talk about kind of how it played out. It wasn't particularly hard. There was a couple of moments, as you said, because some of those mobs can hit pretty hard. But we had the backup of the discarding cards, and I think once it's always a question mark over the scenario, regardless of how you're going, when you don't know what other rooms there are, because you don't know what else is going to come out. And, we've gotten to even some of the earlier scenarios where we've been like, oh, this is going really well. This is going really well. And then, oh, this is the objective. We're like, oh, God, okay, this is going to be tough. So, but once we got that third room open, once we saw what was going on, I think it kind of became, okay, great, cool. We can work out how to do this. Like, it's just going to be a case of all kind of playing together and not doing anything too silly.
Well, and I think collectively we talk about palette cleansers in the past when we had the crab one from ages ago. This kind of felt like that, because we'd had a few scenarios of no prep and where it was quite tense, and we have all this pressure in how we're actually going to play it. This was a callback to the old school way of how we wanted to play it. We want to play with our toys. We want to play with our abilities, and we kind of got that ability to do so.
Yeah, I think from that perspective, it was really well timed just for where we were at. Because, we'd had a few hard ones. We'd had a few ones where we kind of were forced down a path during the scenario that, not that we didn't want to, but it was like, hey, this is the things you've got to do right now. And you're right, being able to just go, all right, let's just kill everything, right? Yeah. Like, it's kind of a low complexity, play with your cards, try some different combos. We've all leveled up, a couple of times. So just being able to do that, I think it was really cool. And it was it was an enjoyable scenario without it being a ridiculously kind of immersive or complex scenario. So yeah, I enjoyed it.
An observation. The list of things that the Bone Shaper probably hate going up against seems to be increasing as we progress through this scenario because of anything that does any kind of AoE status effects, especially ones like Curse, and also the ones that do raw damage at the very start to, and then you throw in difficult terrain, you throw in corridors, and you throw in 2 extra pets that he can't control because they're the hounds. Like, it's another situation where I feel really bad for Calvin. And he had an amazing first room with the massive heal and lots of damage. The minute that corridor came in, I was just like, well, we'll see you at the end.
Yeah, pretty much. So, yeah, it has been a couple of rough ones for him, and not just the monster type, but just the scenario layout. So, which, look, that kind of happened in Gloomhaven as well. You just get some scenario layouts where you're like, this is a bad one for a summoning character. Long ones are really tricky, things with narrow corridors, stuff like that. So, yeah, it just does seem to be a little bit more that can kind of get in the way of, him being able to do his stuff. But as you said, he had a massive first room, which probably made up for it. And,
He made that scenario like what it was because we didn't have to discard cards. I made the mistake of not bringing much healing. And in a wound-heavy situation, if it wasn't for that, we may not be talking about this right now.
Yeah,
honestly.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially with a Deathwalker that can't heal themselves. Well, I have to squeeze one in every episode, Phil.
Hey, he used his potion. He did, and he wrote it down.
Oh, well, yeah, he almost forgot. I had to help him out with that. All right, let's talk about the battle goals for this particular one. Gaz, do you remember what you had?
What did I have?
I wrote down something about removing a negative condition. Does that help?
Oh, yeah, that's right. I had to remove 2 negative conditions from either myself or allies in the scenario.
Just in the whole scenario, but not in a single turn kind of thing?
Yeah, I believe so. I think I ended up doing it in a single turn anyway, but it was a case of, which was pretty easy because I had the heal necklace and a healing potion, and I've got a heal card, so it was going to be easy. And plus, we were up against mobs that threw innate wounding.
Yeah.
So I think I got wounded and I healed myself and someone else.
Does healing yourself count?
It says yourself or allies. So,
okay.
Yeah. So yeah, that was pretty easy.
Yeah, really challenging. Well done. Don't know how
there was one tick. I had a 2-tick one on there, and I think I was kill a monster in the first round before it activates. But not in the first round. Kill a monster before it has its
activates.
turn. Yeah.
Or you could have done that in that third room.
Well, possibly, right? But I didn't end up killing it, so I would have been sad.
Yeah.
The problem is I could probably see doing that one because I do have a big attack. But again, it's very reliant on
mob type.
But also because my deck is so chaotic, right? I can't have elements on my very first turn. And so I have to go really early, has to be within range, and then I have to not draw terribly, right? And there's a good chance that I don't draw well. So yeah, I was looking at going, nah, I don't have enough pure burst to be able to do that reliably.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Phil, our Deathwalker, he had one that he misunderstood. And he was very pleased to say that he passed, only for us to shatter his dreams and say, no, that's not how that works. But, did he get it? I can't remember. But it was the one that says, I can't remember the name of it, but you can't you can't end your turn in the hex that you started your turn in more than 3 times for the scenario.
That's
and
right.
He took that as in the same spot for 3 rounds in a row. So if you stay in the same spot twice and then move on the third one, it kind of clears it. And then you go again, and then we're like, no, that's not how that works. I actually think he may have passed that by accident, but I can't remember.
Nah.
It's one of those ones that you kind of have to track yourself, and it's an honor system thing because no one else is going to be tracking that.
Yep. No, I don't believe that he did because I think that he spent a few turns just chilling.
Calvin had kill and loot in the same round, which I achieved before him, even though I didn't have that battle goal. Because it's one of those moments where you hit something and then, what am I going to do with my move? I know, I'll move on to the loot it just dropped. So that was a nice, easy one for him. and I had Prepper, which I hid so well. Prepper is the one where you're not allowed to play an attack ability for 3 rounds. And this was perfect because I could prep for 1 round, and then I could half prep for the next round and throw a heal at someone else. And then by the 3rd round, by the time I wanted to do anything, I couldn't because all the spaces were taken. I couldn't get to anything. And I also played my move 2 ability. So I was like, oh, where am I going to go? And everyone was like, oh, okay. And then I was like, yes, battle goal done.
Yeah. And for those that remember, I got that one a few scenarios ago and completely misread it and stuffed it up and didn't accomplish it. Even the cheating version of it that was do it once. I didn't realize it was 3. And I had actually dubbed that card the Deddy. So instead of Prepper. So it's fitting that he got it and then managed to do nothing for 3 turns and disguise it.
Yeah.
But I mean, what's cool about the game is that because we don't know what cards we have, right, you can get away with that kind of stuff. And it wasn't detrimental to the scenario, right? Like if it had been a super hectic first room 1 and you had literally been running around doing doughies, not doing anything, might have called out and been like, hey, like, come on, can you do some things? But because we don't know your cards, like when you were like, oh, yeah, no, I can only move 2, I can only move here. Like we weren't going to questions like, oh, well, why didn't you play your 3 move with a jump card? Because you don't know all the other cards people have. And it's cool because it just completely removes that quarterbacking piece.
Yeah. On that note, like there are times in previous scenarios I've said that I've cooked a battle goal intentionally to save the scenario, to do my bit in the scenario. And I think we've all kind of got that. None of us are going to throw a scenario just to try and complete a battle goal.
Yeah, definitely.
And I knew that I could get away with it, but if by turn 3 I needed to do something, I would have. It's just handy because I get away with the whole prep thing from the persistent abilities, but the Drifter also comes with healing abilities. So I feel like I'm still contributing that way without performing an attack. Or technically I could do my move 3 with shield. And retaliate and just stand there and do that instead for a round and get away with it that way. I'm still contributing by soaking damage. So it actually is a pretty good one for me to have, unless it's a no prep one where we are on a really strict timer.
Yeah, that's a good call.
All right. So because Phil, our good friend Phil, who's been tracking all of our stats, has been taking his job very seriously. He's now printed everything out on a piece of paper. He printed 15 of these things out, which is really, really handy, except he put our class names at the top instead of our names, which means if we retire, we can't use them. They're just unusable.
Yep. So new plan is we're all going to retire next week, so he has to print 15 more out.
That's right. So starting off with the Deathwalker, damage was 50. Very respectful, considering I don't really remember much of it, but he must have been hitting like a truck, right? I can see the 10 in there, and there's another 10 in there. He's had 2 rounds of 10 damage. So one was definitely the Bane. I don't know if he baned a second target or not. So
nah, he would have just crit.
Oh yeah, of course. The standard the crit.
And a crit. Like I have 3 crits in my deck and can't pull any of them. He has 1. I think I pulled my miss 3 times.
Yeah. You're good at that. Phil also took 6 damage. So he wasn't at the front lines. That's just a lot of damage for him to not take. There's probably a better way I could have said that. He didn't take much damage compared to running around on 1 health, which is kind of common for him. And he healed for 5. Now, that I questioned, but 3 of them was from his potion, and 2 was from a long rest.
Okay.
I have questioned in the past. I was like, do you not long rest, like, at all? Or do you not get healed for that? Like, surely there's some kind of healing here. But he did. Look, he did some. And they're pretty good numbers. Now he's called you a Germinate. There's an R in there, okay? So you're officially a Germinate.
For 15 pages.
That's yeah. So you did 34, -1. So there's a tiny bit of shield in there. So 33 effective damage. Damage taken was 33 minus 10, which is pretty good. So, I mean, this is consistent. This is what we see, is you and I generally, and actually Calvin's pets as well, because we are factoring that in. Absorbing a lot of damage and making sure that we have a nice even spread throughout the group. There's not one person taking most of it. And yeah, you mitigated a fair bit of that, so well done. You also healed for 11. So nice numbers there. Our Bone Shaper did 25 damage. That the majority of that was probably in the first room. And then
considering he really struggled to get his minions anywhere near the mobs in the second and third room, like 25 is a pretty good effort right? Because I feel like if he was able to get one or two in the next room early, that easily could have been 40.
Well, his numbers individually were big. He had 2 rounds of 5, and he had a 4 and a 6. So,
Mm.
like the rounds where he was hitting fairly hard.
Yep.
Damage taken, he had 20 minus 8. So again, yeah, good pet tanking from him. And then healing, 34. 34 healing for the scenario.
Big
Um,
numbers.
yeah,
Big.
very, very, very large. And then Drifter was me. I finished on 48, so 2 behind our Deathwalker. I had 110, so that must have been a crit. Damage taken was 29 minus 13. So where you did 33 minus 10, I did 29 minus 13. So really kind of even with our mitigation there and absorbing, which was really cool. And I healed for 8. So no, I really think that was really, really good and really well managed. Overall, my general thoughts on this scenario was it was a brilliant palate cleanser. It wasn't too tense, but it was one where we could almost get our frustrations out there while still just making new discoveries because new cards were being played, new techniques were being discovered, and also we encountered some brand new creatures as well. So that was really, really cool.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think from an enjoying me experience, I quite liked it. I had a good time doing it, and yeah, it was a good one to play.
And we've got another random scenario that we have yet to do. I think there's a requirement before we can go do it, which we'll work out what that is. But I guess what I'm saying is some of these random side ones that we're discovering, they're actually kind of handy to have as a guys. I just want to hit something. Let's just go do this and break it up a little bit, which is what we did this time. So no, I think it's great.
Yep.
All right. Well, that will be just about it for episode 11 of M-Dirt here. Thank you all for listening, and we look forward to catching up with you all next week. I've been your host, Eddie. Joining me was Gaz.
And remember, when it comes to rolling terribly, it's all in the wrist.